And I have the very, very high honor of welcoming a very talented and incredible guest here tonight, Tima Elhajj. Thank you very much for coming on to our show today.
It's my pleasure. What an amazing introduction. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you. So, I'll provide a brief bio about you. And what I'm going to do is let's go into some of the things that you teach as essentially a very strategic, very organized, and very visible social media strategist and content creator. So you are the CEO and founder of Tima Media. So part of the mission is emotional intelligence combined with social media presence in order to help really C-suite executives and entrepreneurs become thought leaders, creating an enduring and profound impact. And I know something we touched upon last time was content. And, I think we see a lot of things with the Lambos and yachts, in many industries, whether it's cryptocurrency, whether it's day trading. But what I want to know is, what is purpose-driven content? Because I know this is your angle, this is your tool, and this is clearly what's made you successful in what you do. I mean, you have over 100,000 followers just on LinkedIn alone. So what I want to know is, and I think what many want to know is, what is purpose-driven content?
So it's basically, it comes from the core of everything that you do. So every piece of content that I put out there, or that any of my clients put out there, are very much in line with their mission and their vision. So it really is in tune with their actual bigger mission, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve, whatever that impact that they want to have on the world or in their industry, or whatever it is that they're trying to do. That's where that purpose-driven piece comes from. So it's a lot different to, I have a product or I have a service and I want you to buy from me. It comes from a place of, this is something that is really quite meaningful, and this is why we're here, and this is why we're doing this. And there's no selling involved. It's really just talking about those things that are really meaningful to their company, and the message that they actually want to put out in the world. So it's quite deep, and the layers that we unfold when we're working with our clients, it really just goes back to the core. And what's really interesting, Adam, is that, when you've been in business for so long, you kind of forget why you're in business. And this process is really helpful because, we get caught up in the whole sales process and getting, new clients and focusing on revenue and focusing on all these sort of things, which are all very, very important. But we can lose sight as to why we started something in the first place. And that why, that core, that purpose and that mission really is what fuels that person to keep going forward, so that's really where it comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've heard this phrase thrown around a lot, content is king. And from the looks of it nowadays, I think regardless of what industry you're in, you almost have to have content in order to be competitive. So I wanted to know what your thoughts on that, and how did it come to be that way? Because I think maybe until about 2 years ago, I can't say I've seen many companies necessarily putting out really content, especially meaningful content. And I think a lot of times, if companies put out content, I think it was just traditional, here's our service, here's our product, please buy this from us. And now, over the past 2 years, you see companies trying to put out meaningful content. I guess you could say espousing some sort of sincerity or some sort of genuine mission. So how do you think it came to be like that?
That's such a good question, Adam. I'm not 100% sure. I think Gary Vaynerchuk was one of the first pioneers when it came to like content creation in general, and really just making it normal for business and normal to, have that brand out there. I think he may not have been the first, but he made it okay, and he made it a thing, and he made it, this is part of his business model. And and I think he pioneered the way, and then having, the videographers and constantly putting out vlogs. I think at one stage he was doing like a vlog a day for I don't know how long. And it was really, really interesting to see what it was like behind the scenes. And I think that human connection is something that we really, really want. You know, for example, you know, if we look at Tesla, we don't think of Tesla, we think of Elon Musk. You know, we think of
Right.
him as the human, as the person that's achieved all of these incredible things, where he's built all these businesses from scratch, and sleepless nights and all of those things. It's those stories that make us we're attracted to the brand or that company. It's not necessarily the company or the product or
Right.
service. You know, that's kind of like secondary. So I think that's really why I think it really works. And that human connection, especially with everything that we're going through in the world right now,
Right.
we crave human connection. We really, really do. And we're quite smart now. Like, we know who is fake and who isn't fake. And you can just tell pretty much instantly when you watch a video or when you see someone online as to whether they're the real deal or not. And we just want, I think a majority of us want to be around people that are, you know, proper real human beings, and that we can actually resonate with them.
Right. And in your opinion, what are some major red flags when you're seeing content of, let's say, it's from other thought leaders or other CEOs or other, let's say, purported influencers? What red flags do you see that, you know, automatically, I guess, maybe send a message to you? Okay, this person is doing something clearly wrong in their messaging. They're either being insincere, or they're either trying to be something that they're not. So, what obvious things have you seen where that red flag pops up in your head?
Well, there's a couple of different ways I can answer that question.
Sure.
One of the things that I'd like to say is that people think that their online brand or their online version of themselves is different to who they are in the real world, and that's actually not true. It's just an extension of who you are, but you're putting that out there digitally. That's the only difference. So it's no different to who you are. You're not creating something totally different to the real person that you are. And I think that just with being social media, because it is highly curated and it's highly filtered, and I don't mean necessarily filters, but you know, we pick and
Right.
choose what we want to share, and you only see the wins, you only see the success, you only see the good things that happen, and I think people become really quite fixated on that, and then they build this persona around what they see and what they think is working for other people, and then they try and make that as part of their story, but it's not congruent to their values. It's not congruent to whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. So in a way, they're borrowing other people's thoughts and ideas and dreams and incorporating in their world. And they may have the best of intentions, but whoever's watching them is thinking, you know, this doesn't feel right, or this person doesn't seem genuine. And that's one of the things that people do get wrong. Another thing is, you know, if someone's in a very professional, highly corporate environment, they think that they can't share their personality online, or that all they can do is talk about products and services.
Sure.
And again, it's not true. You know, people want to know what somebody stands for. That's why all the reality shows work really well. Like, is it Ryan Serhant? I can't pronounce his surname. You know, the guy in the real estate in the US, he sells property in the end. He's a real estate person, like he's a real estate agent. I mean, how much more exciting can you get with that?
Sure.
Okay, he sells luxury properties. I totally understand that desirable component, but people are really interested in how he became successful. How did he suddenly, you know, create such a big business and such a big name for himself? And that story component really, really is what draws people in. And sometimes people get that wrong, where they start off with sharing all of their story initially, and then there's nothing left for them to share. It's a bit like,
no mystery left.
No mystery left. And there has to be a strategy behind it, where, you know, one other thing that people do is they think vulnerability is just about crying and just sharing and dumping trauma and then kind of just leaving it, and then no resolution, no way of how they manage to deal with the challenges, and that doesn't really help anyone. So it's great to show vulnerability, but there has to be a thought process. And if there is no thought behind it, it's so disjointed that you're going to confuse people along the way, and they won't be able to understand who you are.
That's a very great point. And vulnerability is a common theme that I've seen a lot, whether this is on LinkedIn or Instagram, for people that are promoting personal brands or trying to promote their own products and services through their own personal brand. A lot of times people will make some content involving a story, and often either a relatively traumatic story or in some cases a very traumatic story. And I've seen it work effectively. However, I have seen instances where it has backfired. So for anybody who's looking to be an influencer and, really make purpose-driven, sincere content, how do you, I guess, express that vulnerability without taking away from your own credibility or really creating a distraction from what your actual mission is?
You ask really good questions, Adam. Let me
Oh,
just
okay.
say
I am
that.
not.
You
I'm
really
not.
do. You really do. Great question. First thing I'd love to say is anyone that's setting out to be an influencer, that's a problem already from the very beginning.
Sure.
Because that word influencer means so many things and it has some negative connotations to it, and you're already putting all this pressure on you. Like, what does influencer really mean? That's
Right.
one thing that I always say to people, is just really question why you want to be a celebrity or an influencer online. It needs to happen organically. You need to have that relationship where people choose to fall in love with you, where they choose to follow you, because whatever it is that you're doing, they want to be a part of. And it's not because you're good looking, and it's not because you have an expensive car and
Sure.
you get free gifts. It's like more than that. There has to be substance. That's what causes that longevity. In terms of the vulnerability and how to share that without losing credibility, that's a really good point. So that vulnerability space, again, it doesn't have to mean that you have to cry on camera. It doesn't mean that you have to share all of your secrets. Pick and decide which parts of who you are and which parts of your past and your story that you're willing to share, but do it in a way that is going to really help people. What are the lessons? What are the things that you did along the way that helped you manage through those challenges? So there's no point in just sharing something to say, I've shared it, I'm just being honest.
Sure.
That's not helpful to you or to anyone. So what is the purpose of you sharing that? How does that link back to your mission? How does that make people feel? What is the impact that you are going to have, not only on the person that's watching you, but on your industry? Like, you really need to link all back to that, because if you don't, you can steer away from the real reason as to why you're building this brand online. And then sometimes we can just lose complete focus and we can overshare, and you can't take that back.
Right.
Especially if you're a private person, you can't take back oversharing, and that can be a little bit dangerous for your brand.
Right. And I have a question about Gary Vee. He is incredibly successful. Regardless of what platform he's on, he has a large audience, and I would say an ever-growing audience. However, a lot of criticism that comes my way, oh, he's corny. The advice that he gives is too simple. It's almost it's almost like just rhetoric, in a sense. So what do you think that he does that works so well as an influencer and as a personal brand of who he is and what he does?
I think that one of the first things that he does really well is he's really in tune with his community and he's with his audience. Like, he really is. He's very connected to them. It's like he could almost pretty much name everybody that follows him. I really feel that that's a real powerful gift that he has. But he obviously spends a lot of time in the comments, and he responds to people, and he gets involved quite a lot. He does that really, really well. I think the other thing too, which I mentioned to you, I think the last time we spoke, is that his underlying message is kindness. You don't really
Right.
see anybody in business talking about kindness. People are talking about, six figures and how to hit the,
Right.
6 figures, how to get clients, which are all very important too, by the way. But he talks about kindness. He talks about being real with yourself, being honest with yourself. The cliche following your dreams, all those sort of things. Yeah, it is a little bit rhetoric, and I can see the cliche-ness of it all,
Right.
but the simplicity of it is actually really important, because we can overcomplicate things. We
Right.
can,
Very true.
especially in business. So I think that he does those things really, really well. But also he's very much in tune with the world and technology and where things are heading. And he's very giving and generous with information. He's not worried about somebody else doing better than him. He's just not. He's willing to give the information for free. He's willing to
Right.
teach people, because 9 times out of 10, I'm sure you know this, Adam, if you're giving something away for free, only the very few will actually do something with that information. But people do love knowing that they're getting something for free, and they feel a little bit of love. So he does that extremely well.
That is so true, and that is an excellent point. And when working with clients, when you're essentially teaching and almost retraining, I think, some of the thought processes for some of these, whether they're, co-founders or startup founders, or, CEOs and other types of C-suite executives. When it comes to working with those people and their branding and their messaging, what are some of the initial problems or issues that you see? Like, I guess when diagnosing, okay, this is why they're not getting the audience that they desire. This is why, their analytics have been stagnant. Like are some of these people just kind of in their own way, or is it like a lack of maybe technical finesse or expertise or something like that?
It usually is a combination of things. I mean, the technical things and the visual things are very small changes that make a massive difference. Like, for example, I had a client where he had all these professionally, beautifully edited videos, but he never looked into the camera. It looked like somebody was interviewing him, and he was
Oh,
like looking to
okay.
the side. And a lot of people do that, and I think that that's fine, but there's no connection. You can't connect with someone's eyes unless you're looking at them, and that's how we speak in real life, and that's how we should
Right.
speak on camera. It's those little things. But the things that are really the biggest challenges that people face is that they actually don't even know what their message is. They don't know what it is
Wow.
that they want to put out there. And it sounds really simple, but if somebody asked you, what's your message? It's like, oh, hang on a second, let me think about that. I don't really know. I don't really know what I want to put out there, and I don't really know what my goals are, and what do I really want to achieve from this. And if it is just leads, or if it is just celebrity status, then there's a real problem, because we're going to start from a very disingenuous place. So it has to come from a place that's meaningful. They have to be emotionally connected to it. It has to mean something to them. It has to be that there is no option, that this is their mission. Like that passion has to come through. If there is no passion, and people don't feel it, you lose people. I mean, there's a reason why the videos are calculated within the first 3 seconds of whether that's taken as a view or not. And if you don't capture somebody within the first 3 seconds, you've lost them. And so the real fight is not necessarily the most beautiful content. It's how do you stop people from scrolling and stopping at your piece of content, and how do you grab their attention? And what sets people apart is that emotion. It's that passion. And that's what people love. We don't want to be sold to. No one likes being sold to. I mean,
Right.
sometimes we need to be sold to, but that's something that a lot of people think, that they need to keep selling. There is nothing like just creating content and never having to actually sell anything, except making somebody feel something enough to actually reach out to you, or to want to keep following you. And that's the process that I follow, and that's the process that I share with my clients.
Right. And I would have to say this for anybody that uses LinkedIn and other social media platforms. I have to say you're a very, very visible person. Your content and your postings have a tremendous amount of I guess you could say, interaction between users, between comments and likes and things along those lines. And I find a lot of your content very inspiring and motivating. So I certainly have to say you definitely practice what you preach. And I think your story, your background is particularly very interesting. You were an entrepreneur, business owner, fully qualified, certified financial planner based out of Australia. And by the way, that is by no means an easy industry to say the very least. So how did you do this as a financial planner for 16 years with your own successful practice to essentially re-inspiring, so to say, C-suite executives and entrepreneurs, and I think growing audiences in the way that you do? Like, how did this journey start from maybe step A to B and so on and so forth?
It's so funny. Anytime anyone asks me about that and says, how did you change and pivot, and the global word pivot now,
Right.
but financial planning was it took me a long time to make the decision to leave the industry. I didn't wake up and go, I'm going to teach people and help companies create visibility online. That never actually happened. I created a new mission for myself because I really just, my heart was just not in the industry anymore. I was doing well. I had great clients. Everything was fine, but I just was not in a place where it fueled me anymore. And I tried so hard to keep going, but it just wasn't working out for me, like internally. So I left the industry, but I left with a course that I wanted to sell, which was focused on the corporates because that's my background. And it was all about reinventing yourself and creating a new purpose for your life and a new mission for your life. And I literally left financial planning because I wanted to launch my podcast. That was my next thing. And so when I came online, I had the view of, I needed people to disassociate myself with financial planning into this new thing that I'm trying to pursue. And I didn't know how to describe it. In my head, I'd be like, this new thing that I'm trying to do. I didn't know that I was actually creating a brand for myself. I'm like, I just need to create some videos. How scary, because I don't like the camera. I don't like being in front of the camera. I don't like taking pictures. I'm that kind of person. But I had to get over my own insecurities. My mission was too big and it meant so much to me that I'm like, Tima, just get over yourself. Like, people won't care. And one thing I did mention to you last time was I actually thought I was too old. And I still kind of think I'm a little bit too old to do this content thing. But you know what, when something means something to you, you just get over yourself and you just do it. So I went online and I started to create content videos, and they were all in line with my mission. Every piece of content that I put out there was not even a minute, maximum minute long. And I would talk about my mission and all of the things that I was working on, and the interviews that I had, or whatever it is that I was talking about, all linked back to that. Now, I had no idea that there were these massive companies watching me. I was just doing my thing and I was just putting out content, and I could see my platform growing. I was excited about that, but I didn't know where it was going to take me. So within the first 5 months, I grew my network from 500 to 25,000. And it was no paid, all completely organic. And so these companies that are listed on their stock exchange here in Australia, they reached out to me and they said, hey, we love what you're doing. Can you come in and show us how we can incorporate this in our company? It was like one of the largest property companies in Australia. And I would never have dreamed to have worked with a company like that. I had no product, nothing to offer them. But in my head, I'm like, this is easy. I can create something. I know what I'm doing. They obviously like what they see, and they can see that I've produced results. And this is the corporate world. I can't get this wrong. So I just walked into this meeting pretty much like making it out like I had this media agency, which really didn't exist. But I knew in my head that whatever it was that they wanted, I'll figure out a way to help them and make it happen for them. And they pretty much gave me this idea of, okay, there's a real need here in the corporate world, and I have a lot of corporate experience, and they reached out to me. That kind of gave me the enough confidence to go, I should actually take this seriously. So that's really where it all started. I didn't decide. It literally just kind of like came to me, and you know, I mean, building a media company from scratch was, and still is, very challenging, because you know, I'm still learning. I'm still understanding how all of this works, but it was, you know, really exciting to know that there were these companies that actually wanted to work with me, and I didn't even have to sell anything to them. I just had to turn up to the meeting. So
wow, that's incredible. And I have to say, I think it is particularly courageous of you to have enough self-awareness and be honest with yourself, you know, saying, listen, I've been a financial planner for such a long time. My heart is not in it anymore, and I want to do something else. And you said you created a mission. So if you can recall, what was the mission in your head when you finally made that decision? Full steam ahead, I am doing this.
Yeah, it's a very personal mission that, you know, for me, I want to be that person in my family that breaks the cycle and really creates generational wealth, you know, wealth beyond my years, and wealth beyond my parents' years, and my daughter, and all of the people that I care about. And for me, it was all about just linking it back to the impact that I want to have on people's lives. And I wanted to educate and inspire people through communication and really help them believe that there is hope. It all sounds very, very cliche, but at the time when I constructed this mission, that was like my oxygen. Like, that was it for me. Like, I had to make it happen. And I literally gave myself no other option, because it would have felt pretty stupid if it didn't work out. And then I had to go back to financial planning and go back to my clients and go, oh, you know what, that thing when I said I'm leaving you, I kind of have to come back now. So so for me, this mission was all about educating people through my podcast, and really helping people change their lives through other people's stories. And I was really, really adamant, and I still am in doing that. And I believe that I do that through my content. And I mean, Adam, I get messages. I get hundreds of messages, honestly, on a daily basis. And the amount of messages that I've received where people have said to me that my content has saved their life. That's pretty special. Wow. That's pretty special. And when you get messages like that, it's pretty sad, actually, when you realize that obviously there are many people in this world that actually feel, you know, they're in a not so good place, and that my content has saved their life. Like, that's a massive thing. So you know, when you make an impact like that, it just makes you realize that, you know, there is so much more to what you're doing currently, and there's still so much more that you're yet to discover. And I still feel like I'm in that place. Like, I still feel like I haven't completely figured it out. I am constantly aware of, you know, what else can be done here, and what else do I need to evolve for my business, but also for me personally as well. So the mission piece, I feel it was very much set in stone in the beginning, but it's changed a lot. Like, it just grows all the time, depending on where I'm at. So, but mainly, if I can instill hope in people, that's a really special thing, because that's what keeps us going. You know, if we're looking at what's happening in the world right now, especially in Australia, a lot of weird stuff going on here. And without hope, I don't know what we can do. So hope is really important.
And I can imagine, especially with all of those people maybe at their breaking point, and then let's say they see a piece of your content, and that gives them, let's say, the fortitude, the strength, just that extra push, or maybe that you could say that philosophical or emotional type of hug. It's okay, you can do it. That has to probably be one of the biggest successes of what you do, to say the least. And I think, especially with COVID-19, the lockdowns, especially in Australia, you know, if I turn on the news and you know, and I watch some of the stories that come out, it's it's pretty horrific in some cases. And I do think more so than ever with these lockdowns, I think a lot of people are going to take chances to start their own business. Now,
Yeah.
I would have to say you certainly make it look easy, but what I want to know is what were some of the biggest obstacles you faced? Going full steam ahead, you literally put yourself out there as your own personal brand, and literally that brand accelerated and exploded, highly visible. You're getting clients. So what was the learning curve like, in the
Oh
beginning?
my gosh, the learning, it's still learning curve. My issue, Adam, is like, that's easy. I can do that. Like, I don't really think things through sometimes. Like, you want me, I can be a lawyer. I'll be the best lawyer ever. Like that's just like my mentality. So my biggest learning curve was I realized I was actually getting into the tech space.
Right.
And for me, it was not my industry. My industry is finance, it's numbers, it's spreadsheets, it's looking at research, it's talking about insurance and investments. It
Sure.
was not tech. And so for me, it was learning how to do that. And I was literally the amount of YouTube is like my best friend. YouTube and I are very good friends. So YouTube was really my go-to to learn everything when it came to podcasting, and not even necessarily creating content. That really just, to be honest, that came quite naturally. But the communication piece, but all the tech stuff, editing videos, like I taught myself how to edit videos, hiring people, that's tough. That's actually really challenging. It's finding people that not can just do the right job, but people that are actually in line with what you're actually wanting to create for your business. So again, the impact, the mission, everything that you're setting out to achieve, you need to bring people in that actually believe in what you're actually wanting to do. It's not just a job for them. It's like, no, we're really creating something very special here. And this mission of the hope piece, for example, all of my clients that we work with, they're not your regular clients. Like, no matter what industry, like, for example, we've got a client who's in the car industry. The amount of hope that he instills in people, and you think, but he sells cars, like, how can you instill hope in people when you're selling cars? This guy is the most passionate person that I've ever come across in the car industry. And that all connects back to my mission. And my team feel that when they're working on his content, when we're writing his content, we're doing his videos, you can feel, it's important to feel all of that. So the hiring piece is actually the most challenging, to find the right people. But I remember in the beginning, I don't know, your audience will be like highly intelligent and very much in tech. But when I first started, I knew nothing, to the point where I bought a microphone thinking, okay, I'm all set. I can start my podcast. Like, this is literally what the zero knowledge that I had. I bought one of the best Rode mics that you could buy. I'm like,
Nice.
okay, so I've got my mic. I'm done. I'm set. I didn't realize that you had to record it on something. Like, how ridiculous. That is how little knowledge I had. I didn't know anything. I didn't know you had to record. I didn't know you had to edit. I didn't know like what platforms to use. And then I'm thinking, oh, so I need to upload this. How do I do that? Like, I don't know how to do that. So it was like this entire learning process. I literally thought the microphone was enough. And that was actually quite funny at the time and quite stressful.
Right.
So I'm literally had to teach myself everything.
And kind of going on to that a little bit, so I think being a financial planner, especially a certified financial planner, certainly requires hundreds, if not thousands of hours of studying, schooling, just education, generally speaking. What skills did you learn from being a financial planner that were transferable to what you're doing now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So before I did my financial planning course, I also did a double degree in business. So I'm very, very much in the business and finance world. I've been in it for such a long time. I've always loved business. I've always loved money. that's why I decided to get into financial planning, because I just wanted to get close to people that had money. I want to be successful. So I wanted to get close proximity to these people that had money, and they had money to invest. So I thought I can learn from them. So some of the skills that I picked up along the way is, well, of course, numbers are really important. You really need to understand numbers. You need to understand money. You need to understand, you know, how a company is run, what makes a profitable company, what sort of things to look for. I think that analysis piece is really important. Most important thing, it's not even revenue, it's your cash flow. You have to have a very healthy cash flow. You know, we talked about content is king, cash flow is king. That's really important. But in terms of skills, really communication and having the ability to influence people and negotiate. So they're the three things that have really helped me, not just in business, but in life. I think the communication piece is extremely important, because I was dealing with, you know, large companies and also smaller business owners, but really quite successful business owners where they, you know, no one was telling them what to do. And then here I come sitting there telling them what to do when it came to their estate planning and what they should be doing, you know, when they eventually die and what happens to their assets and those sort of things. So for me, it was all about the communication piece, and it still is. I think communication is not talked about enough. It's the way that we build relationships. It is the way we build rapport and also respect and authority amongst people. So that's probably the highest skill, I would say, that's really helped me.
Awesome. And since starting your own media company, what would be some of your largest successes throughout this journey, throughout this process? And by the way, it doesn't have to be like you know, material successes. These could even be emotional or even spiritual successes. You know, I'd like to hear what those were.
Yeah, that's another really good question. I would say, I don't know, sometimes I just have these moments where I literally have this moment where I'm like, okay, I've come from this industry and I'm building something that is totally different to what I would have ever expected and ever even thought of. And that it just gives me that confidence that you seriously can do whatever you want. And you just have to have like a student mindset and be willing to learn and be willing to be wrong. I'm very willing to be wrong, because I just want to keep learning and just want to keep getting better and better. And so I would say that that's probably the thing. I mean, the biggest wins, I mean, you have clients where you didn't have to work too hard to get, because they just love what you do and they've heard so much about you. And I still find that very odd when that just happens. It doesn't happen all the time. There are still clients where I still have to get the business, right? But the ones that totally get what I do and love what I do, they're like, okay, you're the person. That's it. There's like no one else. Like, hang on, let me just show. No, we don't need to. Like, just how much? Just tell me. And it's like, is this actually really happening? That's very interesting when that happens. So that's when you know that you've really built something that's valuable and has meaning to other people. And the whole, I don't like to sell myself, Adam, and that's the truth. That's why my process is like this. So I don't want to sit there and sell myself. I'm of the belief that if you want me to work with you, I'm here. Just come to me. So
awesome. Yeah. And you know, it's funny. So you started off from financial planning, you start your own media company, and now you're working with a largely tech-oriented type client base. So I kind of want to know your feedback on this one thing. So if you look at blockchain technology and look at cryptocurrency, you know, let's say despite whatever gains Bitcoin is making in the news, a lot of people still don't trust cryptocurrency and are very wary, if not completely averse to even attempting to even learn about the subject matter. So, you know, my thoughts are, especially being in this space, there has to be some sort of messaging issue, whether it's influencers or entrepreneurs who talk about this. For some reason, a lot of this stuff almost seems like alchemy to people. So, you with your expertise, I wanted to know what your thoughts were. Maybe kind of looking a little bit from the outside in. Where's the ball being dropped here?
Yeah, I think, well, like you said, it's one of those things that people don't completely understand,
Right.
and it's quite confusing. And for someone to even try to research it on their own and not knowing where to start, there's so much information out there, and it's just very hard to actually learn if you don't really know what you're doing, if that makes sense. So one, there needs to be a lot of education. And I think that's the very beginning, is that people need to be educated around it. Yeah, the trust is a huge thing. And I think the trust really comes from, is this just a fad?
Right.
Is this going to be where the future is heading? I mean, you and I both know, well, that is where the future is heading, but it just doesn't feel real to them because they haven't felt the pain yet. It hasn't hit them yet, if that makes sense. So it's not in their life. So of course it's not going to feel real for them. And that's most likely because they don't understand it. The other thing too is, yes, the influencers, I think just like anything, those get rich quick overnight, and then suddenly
Right.
they're experts, and then they're
Right.
selling $10,000-$15,000 courses to show people how to make money, but they've
Exactly.
only just made money within like 2 or 3 months. It's like suddenly you're an expert and you're teaching people how to make this money. No, you've got to have like a track record. You've got to have some kind of like longevity here before you can start, charging crazy amounts of money and saying you're a millionaire overnight and jet set traveling. And you know what I mean, Adam? People do
Right.
that. Like they have overnight success and suddenly they consider themselves as this expert. And I think that's really, really dangerous. And people don't like that. They will not gravitate towards you. Or the ones that do are the ones that are really desperate, unfortunately, that want to have like some kind of hack into how to create wealth, and they're willing to invest, and then they'll lose their money eventually. So I think those influences definitely play a part of it for sure. But education's huge, Adam. If there is no
Right.
understanding, people will fear it. They will. They
Right.
will. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as the way you orient your media company, what's your personal philosophy as far as completing tasks, as far as getting the most out of whichever client you're working with, or even identifying opportunities? Like, do you have like a certain set of maybe core, whether it's practices or beliefs or observations, or like some kind of inner compass, like an instinct or something like that?
I would say all of that. I mean, I definitely tap into my instinct when it comes to really like understanding the psychology. I really focus on the psychology of the client,
Sure.
because that really helps me. Not that I'm a psychologist, but I have an understanding of it. And I really try and tap into that to sort of really understand what drives them, what motivates them, what are the things that they dislike and like, what are the things that really fuels them. So and that doesn't happen over a one meeting. Like that's throughout the entire time that we're working together. And I'll look at, even for example, like I'm a bit of an analyst, so I'll look at even how they respond to certain questions and the words that they use and the
Sure.
tonality when they're speaking. So all of those sort of things are the finer details that I personally look for, that I incorporate into the strategy. But it's also very values driven. So we do look at their values, and again, this may seem a little bit hippie-ish or cliche maybe to your audience, but the values is really, really important, because that's your decision driver, that's your compass, and that helps me get a really, really good insight into the individual. Because when you're creating content from a place of values and a place of mission and vision and purpose, as we discussed before, it's a real human side. And that's what people connect with. So for me, I look at the little finer details, like even, for example, even the way they move their hands when they're talking, or the pauses that they make when they're talking. So all of those little things really, really help me to understand what is going on in their head, and how can we get whatever it is in their head into content and into the real world. So just one thing I want to make clear is the clients that we work with, they're not desperate for leads. So, I don't advertise my company as a lead generating agency or marketing agency. Our purpose is to help these people create a brand that is going to be strong enough to attract opportunities. They will become a magnet. It's a very elegant, very sophisticated way of selling without having to sell yourself. So it all comes from the finer details.
Yeah, I have to say, when you mentioned before, when you're selling a product or service, I've done something similar, and I almost feel very disingenuous when I feel like I have to sell to somebody, so to say. It feels like a bit of propaganda coming out of my mouth, and I'm sure many people feel something similar regarding that. So I really believe this purpose-driven content, you can really, I think, maximize the tools that you have at your disposal, while also, I think, probably making the world a little bit better in the process too, with some of this, heart-to-heart, very genuine, very, you could say, pure advice to give to people. Like you were mentioning before, it seemed like you really saved somebody who was probably at their breaking point from snapping altogether. You may have stopped somebody, from, having to, go to the hospital or, God forbid, worse. And you know what? I would like to know your upcoming projects, podcasts and otherwise. What do you have in the works?
Yeah, okay. So my podcast is that's my real passion. Like, I really want to keep growing that. I want it to be, I've got like a whole dream of wanting it to be an entire platform, an educational platform, that I'd love to extend that with my podcast called Deconstructing Success. So it's all about deconstructing many different areas of life, not just success. Success is something that I'm personally obsessed with, and really understanding the mindset of individuals. So that's one of the things that I really want to focus on. And there's a couple of other business ideas that I'm in the process of researching and thinking of how to launch in the next couple of months, hopefully. But it all is pretty much around the media and communication space, and, if you like, the tech space. But I'm still learning about all of that. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in that area. But look, for me also, on a personal level, I love speaking. I'd love to do more of that. But the world is very different right now. Speaking is virtual. It's a totally different situation. But my podcast is, I've got some big dreams around that, and I really, really am focusing on trying to get that, continuing to grow and moving forward. So
Right.
thank you for asking.
Yeah, no problem. And, as far as your podcast, and, I would certainly like to, expand the message and, broadcast it a bit. What are some of the themes and nuances that you like to get into with your guests when you have them on your show?
Yeah, so we definitely talk about the business side of things, because again, it's such a natural conversation for me. But I really, really want to know, like, the behind the scenes. Some people say they talk about the behind the scenes, but they never really do. Like, what really happens behind closed doors? What is the cost of success? What is the cost to your marriage and to your relationships with your kids? I mean, we see all these successful people with their jets and everything, but surely there's a price to pay. There has to be. There's always compromise. So what is the real cost to this? And not just to family, but to your mindset, to you as a human. Like, it's like crying in the shower, for like one of those things. Like, what do you do behind closed doors, and how do you pick yourself up? And let's be real. Let's have a real conversation. Let's not just talk about the 7 habits of a highly effective entrepreneur, and I do some yoga, and I have raw eggs, and I meditate. Like, we get all of that, but do people really do that? I don't really know. Is it a bit of a facade? Maybe it is. So let's talk about the real human side of success and the real cost to it, which I think is really important too. I just love just digging into the real core of things, and I think that we do that. But the sad reality, Adam, we've forgotten how to do that, because we're so aware of this world that we live in, where, everything has to be perfect. Everything is about looking a certain way and feeling a certain way. I'll give you a good example. So right now in Australia, it's pretty terrible. Okay, let's be honest. Things are not great here right now.
Could you describe what's going on in specific, in like a relatively specific detail as far as Australia and the current lockdown? For the audience who's a little curious, because I saw something horrific today. I saw, and this is in Australia, a man got arrested in the park in front of his infant daughter, toddler daughter. I think she was about 2 or 3 from the looks of it, because he wasn't wearing a mask. So it really seems that there is a whole lot of suffering going on, and I think the amount of trauma towards that man getting arrested, and especially to his toddler daughter, it's reprehensible. So I think for people who need a little bit more context, like, how would you describe the situation in Australia right now?
How would I describe it? It doesn't feel like Australia at all. And I don't mean to be negative, it's the truth. It just does not feel like the country that I was born in. It feels like it's a bit of a nightmare, actually. The reality is that, slowly and slowly, I feel like our freedom is being taken away. Those videos that you see, a lot of that is happening 100%, but I think it's in certain pockets. I live in Victoria, so Melbourne's the city, and we have been in lockdown for over 200 days out of 540 something days since the coronavirus has hit here. So we've been in lockdown for nearly close to 50% of the time. Children playgrounds have been shut down because, the coronavirus. A lot of people that have other conditions and other illnesses are being ignored because the hospitals are just not accepting and not providing therapy and treatment to other conditions. Coronavirus is the priority. So the situation's not great, but I'm a real optimist. I really just focus on the things that I can manage myself. But I have to say, you do get caught up from time to time in the reality of what's going on. But going back to what I was saying before is, the realness of things. You'll ask people here that live here, how are you? I'm great. I'm staying positive. No one wants to talk about how they're really feeling. It's like, we are not allowed to, not just as in Australia, as in just humans in general. Like, people say, let's be real and let's talk about the reality of things, but there's still this stigma around talking about failure or talking about things that haven't worked out, or talking about, I'm not so great today, or like there is still this masking element of filtering conversations and who we really are in general. And that's why with my podcast, I really love to dig deep and really want to talk about, the things that have actually really happened. And I've had a couple of interviews where I've spoken to people that have had like a criminal background, and I find them fascinating because, if you made it in the criminal world and you were successful, then guess what? You're going to make it in the real world.
It's still alive, no less, too.
It is, exactly. It's like being an entrepreneur, but not necessarily in the most appropriate type of way. But hey, you made it happen for yourself. So let's talk about how you created that success in a better life for you. So there's a lot of that digging that I love. But thank you for asking about Australia. Let's just see where it all heads, and I'm staying hopeful and let's just see where it all goes. But I'm currently homeschooling. I'm still homeschooling my daughter, and I feel like she's probably going to graduate university at home at some stage. It kind of feels like it's never ending. So that's kind of like where we're at right now.
And I just have one more question about Australia, especially for the audience who probably wants a little bit more context. Is there some sort of foreseeable deadline or expiration of this lockdown? Because anytime I read something about Australia, and by the way, this is a country I've always wanted to visit. It's one of those places that's on my personal bucket list. People that I knew growing up who went to Australia, they absolutely loved this. So people who loved surfing, they definitely went to Australia. People who wanted to explore, like the Sydney Opera House, people went there. The wildlife, people went on their own like separate trips for that. So it always seemed like a very fun, very awesome place to to visit on every front, whether you like the city life, whether you like nature. It seemed like a very fun country to visit if you want to hit both of those. So like I was saying, I wanted to know, like, what is there some sort of foreseeable end to this? Like the lock. I mean, you can't keep everybody locked down forever. I mean, like practically speaking, like that, it's unimaginable. But
oh, Adam, like honestly, like the conference that they had yesterday, the premier, who is like, say, a governor of Victoria, basically said that it's an indefinite lockdown here. So that's not great. And the thing is, you know, when we've been in 6 lockdowns, but it's really more like 9 lockdowns. They just won't admit it. But we were meant to go into a snap lockdown about a month ago. And I think we only had about 15 cases at the time, but it's like quadrupled since then. So clearly lockdowns don't work. A lot of us know that, but the government is so disconnected to the people. And they're not really listening. So it is indefinite, unfortunately, in Victoria. But my prediction, not that you asked me for my prediction, but I'll give it to you anyway. I think we'll be in lockdown until at least the end of this year, possibly January, which means that literally nothing is open. The only thing that is open is the supermarket, pharmacies, petrol stations, and, you know, McDonald's and KFC, you know, they're the important ones that are open. But yeah, so everything else is shut. Retail is shut. Everything is shut. So
wow, that's truly horrifying, to say the very least.
It is. It is.
My thoughts and prayers with everybody in Australia. Seriously, that's terrible, to say the least.
It is terrible. It is terrible. And if I can say one more thing, Adam, sorry to cut you off.
No, by all means.
You know, we had 11,000 businesses that have closed down in Victoria alone in the entire time that we've had this. So it's 11,000. It's a huge number. Even if half of them were hobby businesses, that's still a lot of businesses that have shut down. So it's a pretty dire situation. But you know, we can only be hopeful and just keep moving forward and focus on the things that we can, and just do the best that we can and just continue to persevere, because you can't control this. It's insane. It really is crazy.
Right. And I would imagine with your podcast, you're at least providing a certain level of hope for a lot of people in Australia and elsewhere. So I want to know what is some of the best advice you've received from a guest who's been on your show, whether it's about entrepreneurship or life in general?
Yeah, okay. So one interview in particular, which is actually one of my favorites, I interviewed Grant Cardone, and I was really lucky. I actually did this in person. And he was so wonderful to interview, let me just say. I know that some people don't like him, and there are people that do, but he was the nicest person I have ever met. Like, he was so generous, so respectful. You know, he treated me like he's known me for years. So, so lovely. One of the things that he talked about was being obsessed with whatever it is that you're doing. And that obsession, I think I really agree with him. You have to be obsessed with whatever it is that you're setting out to achieve, because that obsession, that you don't give yourself any other option, and you're living and breathing this concept, this idea, this business, whatever it is that you're doing, that obsession is really, really powerful. And he also talked about getting known and being seen. And that's really what helped him with his business. You know, he went from almost literally losing everything in the global financial crisis in 2008, where he owed like $40 million, to them building, pretty much just rebuilding himself. And what helped him, and I don't mean to talk about this because this is what my company does, but it's the branding, it's the being seen, being known. You know, you mentioned earlier on is, you know, it's almost like impossible for people not to create content. Him putting himself out there made him powerful enough to have conversations with people that take him seriously, because he was one of the very few at the time that was doing it. So they're the two pieces of advice from that particular interview. But one other interview, talking to Dr. John DeMartini, he talks a lot about values and purpose, and he talks about one of the reasons why people do feel depressed or feel anxious, it's because they're not living in line with their purpose. They are not living in line with their true value system. And if you are living in misalignment to those things, that's where a lot of the anxiety and a lot of the depression and that lack of fulfillment and that lack of, you know, why am I here? Like, why do I feel like I'm not important, or why do I feel that I'm not happy even though I have everything? It's because you're misaligned with your values. And that was so powerful, because so many people feel like that. They just do, and they don't know why. So having that clarity around what your values are is really, really important, because it helps you really understand what your purpose is in life. So they're really the bits of information that I'd love to share. But I mean, there's so many to talk about, but they're the ones that really stood out to me.
Right. Yeah. You know, it seems like having a purpose, having some sort of meaning that goes beyond yourself, seems like a very, very good antidote to things like apathy, confusion, sadness. Because I think some of that is especially felt during the lockdowns right now. I think especially with many people losing their jobs, many people essentially forced to be confined within the four walls of their house. I think it is very easy to essentially look inwards and only see the negative, and not really, you know, create a purpose, or maybe really only see everything as glass half empty, or maybe no glass at all. So we've touched upon a lot of very deep philosophical themes here. So I want to know, if I was to look at your bookshelf right now, what books, what authors do you have up there?
Oh my goodness. Surprise, surprise, all the deep and meaningful authors. I know I have a combination of things. I love reading about business. I've got Dr. Joe Dispenza. I've got James Clear's book. I've got, oh my gosh, I can't even think. I've got Dr. Carol Dweck, Mindset. There's a lot of books around. It's great. Yeah. For anyone that really doesn't know what it means to have a growth mindset, you've got to read that book. Like, that literally changed my life, reading that book. That was really the starting point for everything for me.
And just for the audience, could you repeat the name and author of that book?
Dr. Carol Dweck, and it's called Mindset. And you know, when you feel like you were born a certain way and you're like, this is just who I am, that's it. Like, I'm intelligent to a certain degree, like however you can measure your intelligence. This is my character, this is my personality, and you feel like this is just who you are, and you can't change it. That book basically shows you how to change yourself and reconstruct yourself. And I'm a huge believer in reconstructing who you are. If you're not happy with who you are, you can reconstruct yourself. You can pull yourself apart and become this person that you want to be. And that book was really, really helpful, because there's a lot of psychology, there's a lot of studies, there's a lot of scientific evidence there, and if you need that, that will help you. So there's a lot of those sort of books, but then there's the spiritual type books as well that I read, and they all escape me right now. I don't know why, but they all do. I can't think of any, but I will send them to you if you want to share them with your audience. But like, you know, A Seed of the Soul and all of those sort of things. But I'm very, very much, I love learning about the brain, and I love learning about the psychology behind things, and also obviously people's stories too. But business is a huge part of my reading. I just love it. Can't get enough of it.
Awesome. And on a final note, perhaps taking a page out of your book, what advice or what words would you leave the audience, or anybody who's even trying to become an entrepreneur and start a business right now in 2020 with all this craziness going on right now?
I'm going to give logical advice here. If you're thinking of setting up a business, please don't throw yourself into it. Don't follow that advice of just go do it. Be really smart about it and strategic about it. You need money. Make
Right.
sure you have enough money to live life and pay your bills and you know, what does that look like? Well, if you've got like 6 months worth, that's a pretty good start. Don't throw yourself into something where you are going to be desperate in terms of your decision making process because you wanted to do, let's just throw myself into it and see what happens. I do understand that sometimes works, but what doesn't work is when you literally have no money and you don't have any clients and you can't move forward in any way, and that just not only ruins your confidence, but it can ruin your mental health as well. So I think that having a proper financial plan, here we go, and having enough money to focus on the things that are going to help you pay your bills, where it's all done, paid for. Your focus is how do I bring the clients in? How do I bring the revenue in? How do I market my business? Who do I need to reach out to? Who do I need to network with without doing those things in complete desperation? It makes a massive difference because you are more in control of your business and your decision making than if you don't have the money for it. So really, really important.
Right. And, just to add a little, I think that is a bit of advice a lot of people don't want to hear, but they should hear. You do need money and you do need to prepare and you do need to plan when doing anything, I think, regarding starting up a business and, whichever next moves you're going to make, because passion seems to be great, but I think that can be chopped down very easily when you're faced with the harsh realities of what ends up coming up without a plan.
Absolutely. I mean, passion is great, but if you have no money, you're going to lose that passion very quickly.
Right. It will.
And then you'll regret it in 6 months' time when you go back to work. You're like, oh gosh, if only I had a little bit more money, I would have kept going. So just be smart about it. It's not the end of the world. You don't have to start it today. It feels like you need to because 3,000 other people are doing it. But guess what? They're not you. They don't have your brain. They don't have your perspective. They don't have your experiences. They don't have the way you view things and the way you problem solve and your network and all of those things. All of those things is what is going to help you become a success. It is not because you have to do it now because Gary Vee told you or anybody else told you or social media. You've got to do it and be smart about it, because when you're smart about it, that's when you will be ahead of the crowd, because the rest are going to then try and catch up with you, but you were playing it a lot smarter than the rest. So I hope people take that advice. So
that's awesome. Well, listen, on an ending note, Tima, it was an absolute pleasure having you come on. I think this past 1 hour has been very enlightening and very educational for me. And I think all of this advice, whether the soft sounding or rough sounding, I think everybody should hear this and everybody should just keep this in mind. And I personally think no matter what, if you have a plan, and I think even if you fail, you'll still feel a little bit better because you'll at least be able to diagnose a bit better where things went wrong. So I had an absolute great time with you. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Adam. You had such great questions. And can I just say, I feel kind of cool being on your show because there's a lot of tech people here and I don't consider myself a cool person at all. So this is kind of like my little confidence, a bit of a boost. So thank you so much for having me on. And you had great questions and I really enjoyed my time as well. So thank you.
Well, I can definitely say you're very popular now, and I'm very much looking forward to the next episodes of your podcast and everything else you have in the works. So thank
you so much. Thank you.
Tima, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.